He had no idea that my father had spent the last 4 years of his life working quietly with a property attorney in Bozeman, Montana, transferring a 212-acre farm into a structure so layered, so deliberately built, that the moment my brother signed the sale agreement and handed over a deed he believed was his to hand, he had signed something that did not belong to him. My brother sold a farm he did not own. The buyer's title search took 11 days. On the 12th day, a woman named Harriet Coles called my phone from a law office on Main Street in Bozeman and said 4 words that I will hear for the rest of my life. "Your daughter owns this." This is the story of what my father understood about his family long before any of us understood it about ourselves, and what he did, in the quiet years at the end of his life, to make sure it was protected. My name is Frances Dolan. I am 44 years old. I am a licensed land surveyor and GIS specialist based in Bozeman, Montana, where I have worked for the past 11 years at a civil engineering consultancy called Meridian Land Group. My work involves boundary determinations, title research, and the kind of careful spatial analysis that requires you to understand not just what a parcel of land looks like on a map, but what its legal history actually is, who has owned it, how it was transferred, what encumbrances are attached, and whether the person claiming ownership has a chain of title that holds. I tell you my profession because it is the first thing my brother underestimated about me. He underestimated several things, but that was the first. My father's name was Gerald Dolan. He was 78 years old when he died in October 2 years ago, in the farmhouse where he had lived for 51 years. On a 212-acre property in the Gallatin Valley, 12 miles outside Bozeman. The farm had been in the Dolan family since 1961, when my grandfather purchased the original parcel, then 160 acres, and began running cattle on land that looked, in October, like a thing a person would be forgiven for calling beautiful, broad and flat toward the valley floor, rising gently to the east, framed by the Bridger Range to the north and the Spanish Peaks to the south, with the particular light that the Gallatin Valley holds in the fall, which is gold without being warm, clear without being cold, the kind of light that makes a landscape look like it has always known exactly what it is. My grandfather added 52 acres in 1974. The farm has been 212 acres since then. I have surveyed it myself, twice, in the course of my professional work. Once when my father was considering a conservation easement, and once when the county updated its parcel mapping system and several boundary markers needed verification. I know every corner pin. I know where the creek crosses the northeast parcel, and where the old fence line diverges from the legal boundary by approximately 14 feet. I know the Font Farm the way you know a place you have been paying attention to your whole life. My brother Warren is 4 years older than me. He is 48, and he has spent most of his adult life in a relationship with the farm that was more about identity than investment. Present enough to call himself a rancher at dinner parties in Bozeman, absent enough that the actual work had been done, for the last decade, by a combination of hired hands and my father's own stubborn insistence on remaining operational well past the age when most men would have sold. Warren is not a bad person. I want to be precise about that. He is a person who has always understood the world in terms of what he was owed, and who has spent his life constructing narratives in which his entitlement is the natural order of things. He is charming in the way that people are charming when they have never needed to be anything else. He had been, in our family, the son, the one who was going to take over the farm, the one my father talked to about cattle prices and equipment decisions, the one who showed up at holidays and made our father laugh, and was, in the visible register of family life, present and valued. I was the one who drove my father to his cardiology appointments in Bozeman, every 3 months, for 6 years. I picked him up at 7:30, drove him to the clinic on Kagi Boulevard, sat in the waiting room with a coffee and a file from work, drove him home. I had lunch with him after most of those appointments, not because he asked me to, but because the drive back through the valley in the middle of the day was something I had come to value, in a way I couldn't fully articulate, the particular quality of conversation that happens between a parent and a child when both of them understand, without saying so, that there is a calendar running. Warren drove my father to one appointment. In 6 years. My daughter's name is June. She is 17 years old and she has her grandfather's eyes, that specific Dolan gray, the color of the Bridger Range in winter. And she has, since she was old enough to walk around the farm, treated it with the instinctive seriousness of someone who understands, without needing it explained, that certain places are not just property. June had been going to the farm with me her whole life. She knew the names of the pastures, the South 40, the creek parcel, the high ground. She knew where the best view of the Spanish Peaks was from the east fence line at about 4 in the afternoon. She had helped my father with fencing the summer she was 12, and my father had told her, that summer, that she had good hands for it. He said that about very few people, the hidden strength. The thing Warren never once considered, because Warren had never considered me with any particular attention, was this. I had spent 11 years as a land surveyor specializing in title research, and I had spent 6 years driving my father to his cardiology appointments. And in those 2 streams of time, something had been quietly happening that I was only partially aware of until the phone call from Harriet Coles. My father had been meeting, on the last Tuesday of every 3rd month, on the days I drove him to Bozeman, not only with his cardiologist but, afterward, with an attorney named Harriet Coles, whose office was 4 blocks from the cardiology clinic on Kagi Boulevard. He had been doing this for 4 years. I had not known. I want to sit with that for a moment before continuing, because the shape of what my father did, the care of it, the patience of it, the specific love embedded in the choice to keep it from me until it was complete, is the thing I return to most often when I think about this story. He was not keeping a secret from me. He was building something in the time between the cardiology clinic and the drive home, in the months when we ate lunch together and talked about cattle prices and the condition of the east fence line. And he was doing it quietly because he knew me well enough to know that if I had known, I would have argued with him about it. He knew what he was doing was right. He also knew I would tell him it was too much. So he finished it first. I need to tell you about the plant. The detail I set down here, because it will grow into something later. 3 years before my father died, on a Tuesday in late November, we were eating lunch after his cardiology appointment at a diner in Bozeman that he had been going to since 1987. Booths with red vinyl, coffee that was always slightly too hot, a window that looked out onto the street. He ordered what he always ordered, eggs, toast, no butter on the toast. He said, out of nowhere, with the particular quality of a man raising a subject he has been thinking about for some time. I want to ask you something about title structures. I looked at him, professionally, practically. He turned his coffee cup in his hands. If a person wanted to transfer property to a minor, a grandchild, say, what's the cleanest structure, given Montana law? I told him. I walked through the options: direct gift transfer, custodial arrangement under the Montana Uniform Transfers to Minors Act, a revocable living trust with the minor as remainder beneficiary, an irrevocable trust. I explained the implications of each. The gift tax considerations, the control question, the timing of when the minor would receive full ownership. He listened with the particular quality of a man who is already 3 steps ahead of the conversation, but is letting you catch up. What if someone tried to sell it before the minor was of age? He said. Depends on the structure, I said. In a properly recorded irrevocable trust with a named trustee, the grantor can't unilaterally sell, and if someone tried to convey title without authority, a title search would catch it. You can't pass clean title you don't have. He nodded. He turned his coffee cup once more. Good, he said, that was all. I thought about it on the drive home. I filed it the way I file things, not with urgency, but with the awareness that the detail existed and might at some point become relevant. It became relevant 26 months later, when Harriet Coles called my phone. There are questions that are not questions. They are preparations. The mind of someone who loves you. conducting the final survey of what they are leaving behind, making sure the corners are properly marked before they are gone. My father died on a Tuesday in October, the same day of the week as the cardiology appointments, which I noticed and did not say to anyone. He had declined over the final 3 months, with the particular pace of a heart condition that has run its course. Not sudden, not dramatic, but unmistakable in its direction. I had been with him on the farm for the last 2 weeks, staying in the spare bedroom I had used as a child, driving into Bozeman for work when I needed to, and coming back in the evenings. June came on weekends. She sat with him on the porch in the afternoons, when the light was good, and they talked about things I could hear through the screen door. The cattle, the fencing, what the creek would do this winter, whether the east pasture would need reseeding in the spring. He passed in the early morning, quietly, in his own bed, in the farmhouse that had been his for 51 years. I called Warren. He arrived 4 hours later, driving from Billings, where he had been living for the past 7 years, in the truck he had bought new the previous spring. He walked into the farmhouse and he was, in that first hour, genuinely grieved. I want to say that clearly. The grief was real. Whatever else is true about Warren, his love for our father was real, and the first hours after our father's death were a time when that was the only true thing in the room, and I held it as such. It was in these days that followed that the other thing appeared. The estate process began as these things do, with a meeting at the attorney's office in Bozeman to review the will. Our father's estate attorney was a man named Philip Marsh, at the firm of Marsh & Connolly. A different matter from Harriet Cole's, which I did not yet know was relevant. The will was straightforward in its primary provisions, the farmhouse, and a designated savings account to Warren, and me equally, the farm equipment to Warren, the personal effects divided as listed in a schedule. The farm itself, the 212 acres, was referenced in the will, but the language was not the language of a direct bequest. It said, the real property known as the Dolan Farm, Gallatin County parcel number 06-042144-2011-1000, has been the subject of prior estate planning dispositions and is not included in this probate estate. See attached letter from Harriet Coles & Associates, Bozeman, MT. Philip Marsh noted this at the meeting. He said the attachment was a reference letter, confirming that the farm had been placed into an inter vivos trust prior to my father's death and would not pass through probate. Warren looked at the language. He looked at Philip Marsh. What trust? He said. I'm not familiar with the particulars, Philip said. You'd need to contact Ms. Coles directly. Warren looked at me. I looked at the document, at the parcel number, which I knew, at the phrase inter vivos trust, at Harriet Coles's name, which I had not known to look for. I thought about the diner in Bozeman, 3 years earlier, the coffee cup turning in my father's hands. What if someone tried to sell it before the minor was of age? I did not say anything at the meeting. I'll follow up with Coles, Warren said. He had the particular tone of a person adjusting to new information by immediately moving to control it. I'll come with you, I said. I can handle it, he said. I'm sure you can, I said. I'll come with you. Warren contacted Harriet Coles's office the following Monday. I had already called on Friday. She told me, on Friday, that she could not discuss the trust's contents with me individually prior to the formal disclosure meeting. But that she had been expecting my call, and that the meeting was being scheduled for the following week. She asked if I would be available Wednesday at 10. Yes, I said. Your brother has already requested a separate meeting, she said carefully. I've advised him that the disclosure will be made to all named parties together. I understand, I said, Mrs. Dolan. A brief pause. Your father asked me to tell you, when we spoke, that you were right about the title structure. He said you'd know what that meant. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the Meridian Land Group building. It was a Friday afternoon in October. The Bridgers were visible to the north, the first snow on the upper elevations. I know what it means, I said. In the days between the probate meeting and the Wednesday appointment with Harriet Coles. Warren moved. I learned about it afterward. in stages, from different sources, and I want to tell it in the order I learned it, because the order matters. On Saturday evening, my daughter June called me. She had been out at the farm, she said. She had driven out on her own, which she had begun doing since she got her license, just to walk the property the way she always had. She said there had been a car she didn't recognize parked in the drive. A man she didn't know. She had come inside and the man had been in the kitchen with Warren, and Warren had introduced him as someone from Bozeman, and June had said hello and gone out to walk the east fence line, and when she came back the car was gone. "Did you get a name?" I asked. "He left a card on the table," June said. I took a picture. She sent me the photograph. The card was for a commercial real estate broker named Dennis Alcott, with an office in Bozeman. I sat with that for approximately 4 seconds, then I called Dennis Alcott's office. He was not available on a Saturday evening. I left a message. On Sunday morning Dennis Alcott called me back. He was a cautious man. I could hear the caution in his voice, the specific register of someone who has realized, in the act of returning a call, that the situation may be more complicated than it appeared on Saturday. "I'm Frances Dolan," I said. "Gerald Dolan's daughter. I understand you were at the farm yesterday meeting with my brother Ems Dolan," he said carefully. "I was there in an advisory capacity. Has an offer been made on the property?" A pause. "Mr. Dolan, Warren, presented himself as the owner of record," Dennis said. "He asked me to evaluate the property for a potential sale. We discussed a prospective buyer who has expressed prior interest in the Gallatin Valley parcel. Has a sale agreement been signed?" A longer pause. "I'm not in a position to, Mr. Alcott." I kept my voice level. "I am a licensed land surveyor with 11 years of title research experience, and I am telling you, as a professional courtesy, that the ownership status of the Dolan farm parcel is not what my brother has represented to you. I strongly recommend that any prospective buyer conduct a full title search before executing any agreement." The silence that followed was the silence of a man rapidly recalculating. "I appreciate that," he said. "Good," I said. I ended the call. I sat in my kitchen in Bozeman for a moment. Outside, the October morning was cold and clear. June was still asleep. The mountains were visible from the kitchen window, the snow line lower now than it had been on Friday. I picked up my phone and called Harriet Coles's emergency line, which she had given me on Friday, with the specific instruction that I should use it if anything time-sensitive arose before Wednesday. Something time-sensitive had arisen. There is a particular kind of clarity that comes when all the information you have been carefully accumulating suddenly arranges itself into a single coherent shape. It is not panic. It is the opposite of panic. It is the moment when a surveyor looks at all the data and reads the land. Harriet Coles met me at her office on Sunday afternoon. She was 61 years old, with close-cropped white hair, and the specific economy of movement of a person who has spent 4 decades in rooms where precision mattered. Her office held 2 windows that faced north toward the Bridgers, a desk with nothing on it except a single legal pad, and a shelf of binders labeled by year in a handwriting I recognized as meticulous. She already knew about Dennis Alcott. She had made calls of her own over the weekend, she said, and had confirmed that a purchase agreement had been drafted. Not yet signed, she believed, but drafted, and in the hands of the prospective buyer's attorney for review. "Before I explain the trust structure," she said, "I want to ask you something." "Go ahead." "When your father asked you about title structures, at the diner, I'm guessing it was the November before last, what did you tell him about what happens when someone attempts to convey title they don't hold?" "I told him a title search would catch it," I said. "You can't pass clean title you don't have." She nodded. That is exactly what he was verifying. She opened the folder on the desk. He had already decided on the structure by that point. He was confirming that the protection would work the way he believed it would, from someone who knew. I looked at the folder. "Tell me about the trust," I said. The Dolan Farm Irrevocable Land Trust had been established 4 years and 2 months before my father's death. It was executed on a Tuesday, the last Tuesday of a month, with a cardiology appointment, in Harriet Coles's office. 4 blocks from the clinic on Kagi Boulevard, on an afternoon when I had been in the waiting room with my coffee and a file from work, which is the particular texture of the detail that I find I cannot hold without feeling something I cannot fully name. He had been building it for 4 years, every third month, while I waited. The trust named June Eleanor Dolan as the primary beneficiary. June was 13 when the trust was established. She had turned 17 the previous spring. The trust held the full 212-acre Gallatin County parcel, transferred at the time of the trust's creation, through a recorded deed that had been properly filed with the Gallatin County Clerk and Recorder's Office, where it had been sitting, in the public record, for 4 years, available to anyone who ran a title search. Warren had not run a title search. He had assumed, "I am a land surveyor, I never assume." The trustee named in the document, the person holding legal title on June's behalf until she reached the age of 25, was me. I read that line twice. "He named me," I said. "He was very clear about that," Harriet said. "He said you were the only person in the family who understood what a trustee obligation actually meant, and that he trusted you to hold it correctly." I looked at the trust document. At the date, 4 years and 2 months ago. At the property description, which matched the parcel number I had known my whole life. The 212 acres of the Gallatin Valley, that I had surveyed twice and walked more times than I could count. At June's name, set in the formal language of a legal instrument, as the person for whom all of it was held. "The deed," I said. Harriet slid the recorded deed across the desk. I looked at it with the professional attention of 11 years of title research. The legal description was correct. The grantor was Gerald Thomas Dolan. The grantee was the Dolan Farm Irrevocable Land Trust, Francis Dolan, trustee, for the benefit of June Eleanor Dolan. It had been recorded at the Gallatin County Clerk and Recorder's Office. It had a recording stamp. It had a document number. It was in the public record. "When the buyer's attorney runs the title search," I said, "they will find this deed," Harriet confirmed. "The farm is not in Gerald's probate estate. It is not Warren's to sell. Any purchase agreement Warren signed or attempts to sign conveys nothing, because he has nothing to convey." I set the deed down. I thought about Dennis Alcott's careful voice on the phone, about the caution I had heard, the recalculation happening in real time. "Has Warren been notified of the trust's existence?" I said. "Not formally. The will references it, as you saw at the probate meeting, but the full disclosure meeting, the one scheduled for Wednesday, is the first time the trust document itself will be presented to all parties." "He's going to try to contest it," I said. "Possibly." Harriet folded her hands. "The grounds would be narrow. The trust was established when your father had full cognitive capacity. I have a signed physician's statement from his cardiologist from the same month, confirming exactly that. The trust was executed with 2 independent witnesses. Your father made the transfer 4 years before his death, which eliminates any argument about deathbed decision-making. He paid property taxes on the parcel for the first year after transfer, and then arranged for the trust to assume that obligation, which creates a 4-year record of consistent treatment." She paused. "He also left a letter." I looked at her. "In the trust file," she said, "for the disclosure meeting." She did not tell me what it said. I did not ask. "Wednesday," I said. "Wednesday," she said. I drove home through the Gallatin Valley on Sunday afternoon, the October light doing what it does, gold without warmth, clear without cold. The Bridger Range was to my north. The farm was 12 miles behind me. I thought about 4 years of Tuesday afternoons. About my father in that diner, turning his coffee cup, asking about title structures with the precision of a man who had already made his decision, but wanted to verify the mathematics. I thought about June at 12 years old, helping him with fencing, being told she had good hands for it. I thought about what it means to know someone well enough to understand what they will do with something precious, and to name them as the keeper of it before you go. I pulled into my driveway. I sat in the car for a moment, then I went inside and I made dinner and I told June that there was a meeting on Wednesday and that she should come. "About the farm?" she said. "Yes," I said. She looked at me steadily, with the gray Dolan eyes. Is it okay? Yes, I said. It's okay. She nodded. She accepted that. She went back to the homework she had been working on. I stood at the kitchen counter and thought about my father in the farmhouse. In the last weeks, on the porch in the afternoon with June, talking about the east pasture and the creek and what the winter would bring. And I understood, in the full weight of it, that he had been saying goodbye to the farm through her. That every conversation about the South 40 and the high ground had been a transfer of knowledge, a passing of something forward into her hands, because he had already arranged, on paper, for the land itself to follow. He was not leaving her the farm. He had already given it to her. He was teaching her how to hold it. The Wednesday meeting was at 10 in the morning at Harriet Coles's office. Warren arrived at 9:55. He was composed in the way he was always composed in professional settings. The ease that came from a lifetime of believing rooms were arranged around his arrival. He had not brought an attorney. He had not expected to need one. I had brought a colleague from Meridian Land Group, not an attorney, but a certified title examiner named Sam Priado, who had agreed to attend as a professional witness and who had, on Monday morning at my request, pulled the public record on the Gallatin County parcel and confirmed the recorded trust deed himself. Sam had said, looking at the record, "Your father knew what he was doing." "Yes," I said, "he did." Warren looked at Sam when we came in. He looked at me. He said nothing. Harriet opened the meeting with the procedural overview she had, I suspected, delivered many times, clear, unhurried, specific. She explained that she had served as the attorney for Gerald Thomas Dolan in the establishment of the Dolan Farm Irrevocable Land Trust, that the trust had been created 4 years prior, and that the farm's title had been conveyed by recorded deed at that time. She set the trust document on the table. She set the recorded deed on the table. She set the county recorder's stamp on the table. Warren looked at the documents. He looked at June's name in the trust as the primary beneficiary. He looked at my name as trustee. His expression did not collapse. Warren did not collapse in professional settings. But something moved across his face. The movement of a man whose internal model of a situation has just been corrected by the external record, and who is calculating, in real time, the distance between what he believed and what is true. He did this without telling me. Warren said it was not a question. He did this 4 years ago, Harriet said. The deed has been in the public record since that date. A title search would have shown it, I said. Not unkindly. Precisely. Warren looked at me. The sale agreement, he said, has not been executed, Harriet said. The buyer's attorney contacted my office on Monday after conducting a preliminary title review. They withdrew the prospective buyer from negotiations on the grounds that clear title cannot be conveyed. Dennis Alcott had, apparently, acted on my Sunday morning phone call with more speed than I had given him credit for. Warren looked at the table for a long moment. The room was quiet. Outside the north windows, the Bridger Range was visible, the snow line sitting at about 8,000 feet. He gave it to June, Warren said. He transferred it into trust for June's benefit, with Francis as trustee, to be conveyed to June in full ownership at age 25. Why June? His voice was not angry. It was something I found more difficult, genuinely confused. The confusion of a man who has never questioned his position in the family's architecture and is now being told that the architecture was different from what he assumed. Harriet reached into the folder and produced an envelope, my father's handwriting on the front. For the disclosure meeting, she opened it. She read, my father's letter was 1 page. He had written it in the same careful hand he used for everything. The hand of a man who had filled out farm records and equipment logs and lease agreements for 50 years. He wrote that he had thought carefully about what he wanted to leave behind, and to whom. He wrote that he loved both of his children, and that nothing in the letter should be understood as a judgment on Warren's character. He wrote that character was one thing and reliability another, and that the farm required someone who understood it would be there when needed. He wrote, Frances has been here, every appointment, every season. I have watched her walk that land the way her grandfather walked it, with attention and with care. "She is a surveyor. She understands what boundaries are for," he wrote. "June has her grandfather's eyes and his patience. She has good hands. I watched her on the east fence line and I knew," he wrote. "I am not giving this to Warren because I do not believe Warren will keep it. He will sell it when it is convenient and I cannot watch that happen, so I have arranged it so that it cannot. This is not punishment. It is clarity. I have known my children for a long time, and I have done what I believe is right with what I have built," he wrote, at the end. "The farm does not belong to this generation alone. It belongs to the ones who will use it carefully. It belongs to June." Harriet set the letter down. The room held it. Warren was looking at the table. His jaw was set in the way of a man who is controlling something tightly. His hand, which had been flat on the table, folded once, slowly, the way a man closes a door he cannot reopen. June was beside me. She was 17 years old and she was very still. I did not look at her in that moment, because I could not do it without losing the composure I had been carrying since Sunday. I looked at the window instead, at the mountains, at the line of snow at 8,000 feet. A father who knows his children does not distribute his life's work by sentiment. He distributes it by observation. He has been watching for 40 years. He knows what the land requires. He names the right person, and then he trusts. Warren did not contest the trust. He retained an attorney in the weeks that followed, a Bozeman litigator named Carl Hutchins. And Carl Hutchins reviewed the trust documentation, the deed, the recorder's records, the physician's capacity statement, and the 4-year history of the trust's administration. He reviewed the letter. He reviewed the timeline of the trust's creation, relative to our father's death. When Carl Hutchins called Harriet Coles, I was told, he said 3 words: "This is clean." There was no viable contest. The trust had been established with full cognitive capacity 4 years before death, with independent witnesses, a recorded deed, a physician's statement, 4 years of tax records, and a clear, unambiguous letter of intent. There was no legal instrument Warren had to work with. There was only the fact that our father had known what he was doing and had done it properly. Warren called me in November. I had expected the call to be difficult. It was not exactly what I expected. He was not conciliatory in any performed way. Warren did not perform conciliation, he was direct. "I know you didn't engineer this," he said. "I didn't know about it until Harriet called me," I said. "I know." A pause. "He could have told me." "Yes," I said. "He could have." "He didn't because he knew I'd argue with him." "Probably," I said. A long pause. "The kind that carries more than what's on either side of it." "The sale was going to be to a developer," Warren said. "For a residential subdivision. I had a number in mind, I thought." He stopped. "I thought it was the practical thing." "I know," I said. "He knew too," Warren said. "That's why he did what he did." "Yes," I said. "That's why." We were quiet for a moment. Outside my window, the November sky over Bozeman was the particular gray that precedes snow. The kind of gray that means something is coming. "Is she going to keep it?" Warren said. "I don't know yet," I said. "She's 17, she has some time before she needs to decide." "She'll keep it," Warren said. Quietly, not bitterly, like a man making an accurate prediction. "Probably," I said. He said goodnight. I said goodnight. "I want to tell you about June on the farm in November." She drove out on a Saturday. The first Saturday after the disclosure meeting. The first Saturday she had been out since we had learned what the farm was now, in legal fact, hers. I followed in my own truck, not because she needed me to, but because it seemed right to be there. She parked in the gravel drive. She got out. She stood for a moment looking at the farmhouse. The old structure, white clapboard, the porch where she had sat with her grandfather in the afternoons of his last weeks. The cold had settled in properly now. The cottonwoods along the creek were bare. The mountains were the color of cold iron. She walked the east fence line. I followed at a distance, the way you follow someone who needs the space to do something in their own time. She walked the boundary the way I had walked it. The way her grandfather had walked it. The way his father had walked it before him. With attention, with her eyes on the line of the fence and the country beyond it, with the specific quality of someone who is not touring, but inhabiting. She stopped at the corner pin. The northeast corner. The one that sat at the rise of the land where you could see the entire valley spread out below you, the Spanish peaks to the south, the Bridgers to the north, the flat winter gold of the grass, the creek line dark through the willows. She stood there for a long time. I stood back, and I did not speak, and I thought about my father at this corner, and his father at this corner, and the particular weight of a piece of ground that has been cared for through multiple lives and is still, somehow, itself. June turned around. "There's a survey marker here," she said. She was looking at the post. "It's off." I walked forward. I looked at the marker. She was right. The post had shifted, frost heave probably, from the previous winter, and it was sitting approximately 8 inches east of its legal position. "I know," I said. "I've been meaning to reset it." She looked at me. "Can I help?" "Yes," I said. "Next weekend. We'll bring the equipment." She nodded. She looked back at the valley. "Grandpa said surveyors know what boundaries are for," she said. "He said that in the letter," I said. "He told me something like it too, out here." She paused. "He said a boundary isn't a wall. It's a declaration. It says, this is what this is, and this is where it ends, and both of those things matter." I looked at my daughter, standing at the northeast corner of the farm her great-grandfather had bought in 1961, looking out at the Gallatin Valley in November, with her grandfather's gray eyes and the particular bearing of someone who has just understood something important about what they are standing on. "He was right," I said. "He usually was," she said. She took one more look at the valley. Then she turned and walked back toward the farmhouse, through the cold and the bare cottonwoods and the gold winter grass, and I walked beside her. As trustee, I managed the farm on June's behalf, the lease to the family who has been running cattle on the south parcels for 3 years, the equipment maintenance, the tax filings, the fence line repairs, the annual survey verification I make every spring as a professional obligation and a personal one. I drive the perimeter roads in my work truck, and I know every gate and every corner pin and every place where the land does something specific. Rises, flattens, crosses the creek, opens to the view. I know the farm the way my father knew it, the way his father knew it before him. When June is 25, it will be hers in full. She will decide what to do with it. She may run cattle, she may hold it as open land, she may do something I haven't thought of, because she is 17 now, and she will be a different person at 25. And the farm will ask something of her that she doesn't know yet. My father understood that. He didn't put a condition on what she had to do with it, he put a condition on who could sell it without her consent, and the condition was, no one. Not Warren. Not me. Not anyone who was not June Eleanor Dolan, adult of full legal age, holding clean title on her own terms. That was what he understood. That belonging and decision are different things, and that he could give her the belonging now, and trust her with the decision when she was ready. I was at the county recorder's office in December, professional business, a different parcel, a boundary dispute for a Meridian client. I was at the counter reviewing a document, and on my way out I stopped, as I sometimes do, at the public terminal. I pulled up the Gallatin County parcel number I know by heart, 060421420111000, owner of record. Dolan Farm Irrevocable Land Trust, Francis Dolan, trustee, for the benefit of June Eleanor Dolan. It was there, in the public record. In the place where title lives, not in sentiment, not in memory, but in the indexed, accessible, permanent record of what is true. I stood at the terminal for a moment. I thought about my father in the diner, turning his coffee cup. About 4 years of Tuesday afternoons. About the specific texture of love that expresses itself through recorded deeds and trust documents, and a physician's capacity statement filed against the future. I thought about June at the northeast corner of the farm, identifying a survey marker that had shifted 8 inches east, and the way she had said, "Can I help?" I thought about the winter coming down from the Bridgers, and the cattle on the south pasture, and the creek, crossing the northeast parcel, in the place where I know the water runs. Some things are yours, not because you claimed them, but because someone who knew you, looked carefully at the land, and at you, and made the record match the truth. Warren and I have found a working distance. Not closeness. I will not pretend to closeness that does not exist. But a functional, occasionally warm relationship with the particular texture of two people who have stopped pretending to be something they are not and have agreed, quietly, to be what they actually are. Siblings who love each other imperfectly and have stopped using the imperfection as an excuse. He came to the farm in February with his eldest daughter, who is 12. June walked her around the east fence line and showed her where the survey marker needed resetting and explained what a corner pin was for. Warren stood beside me at the edge of the drive and watched them. She really is like Dad, he said. Yes, I said. And like you. I looked at him. The way she looks at it, he said. The way she pays attention. She has good hands, I said. Dad said so. He was quiet for a moment. The February light on the valley was flat and cold and honest. The mountains were white to the lower elevations now. I should have been here more, he said. It was not an apology designed to receive an absolution. It was a simple statement of fact said to the valley, not quite to me. Yes, I said. You should have. He nodded. He accepted that the way my father had taught both of us in different ways to accept true things, without decoration, without defense. We watched our daughters at the fence line. In March, June asked me to teach her the basics of a property survey. We spent a Saturday at the farm with a total station and a set of field notes and the legal description from the trust deed. I showed her how to establish a control point, how to read the bearing and distance calls in the description, how to locate a corner pin from the record. She was precise and patient, and she asked good questions. At the end of the day, we had walked the full perimeter. We had verified every corner pin. We had reset the northeast marker to its correct position and set a new steel cap. June stood back and looked at the replaced marker. It was exactly where the legal description said it should be. That's it? She said. That's it, I said. Doesn't look like much. It's not supposed to, I said. It's a mark. What it means is in the record. She looked at the marker. She looked at the mountains. She looked at the boundary of the farm her grandfather had given her. All 212 acres of it, correctly marked, accurately described, properly recorded, hers. Okay, she said. I want to learn the whole thing. I know, I said. Will you teach me? I thought about my father who had spent 4 years building something in the hours between a cardiology clinic and a lunch at a diner with red vinyl booths, who had asked me about title structures, because he trusted me to know, and had then built exactly the structure I described, and had named me to hold it until June was ready to hold it herself, who had paid attention for 40 years to his land and to his children and to his granddaughter, and had left the record exactly as true as the land itself. Yes, I said, I'll teach you everything. The land does not care about what you intend, it responds to what you do. The boundary stands or it doesn't. The title is clean or it isn't. The record is accurate or it isn't. This is also, if you pay attention, true about people. Not what we say we are, but what we do with what we are given. That is the record. That is the thing that holds. And that was the year I understood that my father had not been keeping a secret from me for 4 years in those Tuesday afternoons. He had been keeping a promise. To a girl with his eyes who walked fence lines with attention. To a land that deserved to be held by someone who understood what a boundary was for. To the future he could see more clearly than the rest of us, because he had been watching it walk toward him for 17 years. He did the survey, he marked the corners, he filed the record. He trusted us to hold the line.